already on one of the placemats. So what you're gonna do is kind of press the clay out a little bit and then pull it back towards you and push it back down. So if you've ever made bread or dough or anything like that, same idea. This helps get the air bubbles out of the clay and gets it ready for being on the wheel. Okay, so that would be your first step after you get your smock on, and then I'm going to kind of pound it all into place. Justin?
Doesn't that thing spin?
It does.
Oh, I saw a guy doing that.
Okay.
His name is Pottery.
Now, have you heard the term throwing on the pottery wheel?
Yes.
There's an actual reason for that. Because you have to throw it in the middle here, or if it does not stick, when you turn on the wheel, it's going to fly off the wheel and hit somebody. And I've seen it happen many times in college where people don't do it right.
I'm not going to throw it.
Okay, so we're throwing it down, and then I'm going to turn the wheel on.
Hope it's not loud.
We have, most wheels usually have a foot pedal, but this is kind of a lower version than normal, so it has just a dial on the side that goes from low to high. So I want to start it on low, and I'm going to do what's called patty cake, patty cake. I'm just patting it down, making sure it's stuck, okay? You guys gotta be quiet, okay? Once I do patty cake, it has to be wet the entire time I'm doing it after this. So if I feel friction against my fingers, that's not good. So I've got a container of water here with my sponge, and I'm going to wet this down. And I have to continually add water. Basically what I'm doing is I'm adding a layer of slip. Okay, so my fingers can run over it smoothly and nothing happens. I'm going to center the clay now. That means I'm using the centrifugal force and pushing the clay into a perfect circle. You can see right now how it's bumpy, right? See my hand bumping all over the place? Okay, I don't want that. That's not centered. So I've got this up pretty high. I've got my hand wet and I've got the clay wet. I'm going to push my knees into what holds and keeps all of the moisture around, and then I'm going to use my elbows into my legs so my body is stiff. I have to tell the clay where to go. Okay?
Does it hurt if you touch the thing spinning?
Yeah, I'm touching it.
Not the clay, like the actual spinning stuff.
This? Nothing's hot. No. Okay, so water, and I'm going to take this part of my hand, and I'm pushing it into the clay. My other hand is going to go on top and kind of squeeze it into shape. I can also squeeze from the other side if I need to. But if you look, do you see my hand moving all around right now? My elbow is not into my leg, it's rested. I need to really use my whole body and push into this clay. My knees are tightening around this as I do that, okay? And then I push it together. And I like to bring it up and down a little bit. This helps kind of wedge the clay a little bit more and make sure you don't have air bubbles. So my whole body is tight, using all of my muscles to get this clay to center. This is probably the hardest part. And if it's not centered, it's not going to end up being right at all. It'll be a lopsided pot. Don't know yet.
Lamar, keep coming up. Like, bro, he's distracting me so much. I can't.
Okay, so now I'm going to put my hand on top. You see my hand moving? No, I've gotten rid of all the wiggles. It's now totally symmetrical. Okay, there's our symmetry in there. So now I've got to put a hole in the middle to hollow it out. I'm going to actually use both my hands around the sides and then put my thumbs right here in the middle to find that center point and press, just press down.
Are you making a hole?
That is what I just said.
Nope.
How about we keep comments to the end? I think that's going to be best. Can you see okay, like in the middle? Do you need to stand up?
Jamie, come
This is on video?
Once I start to get it open, I'm going to turn my speed down a little bit. I don't want to go through the bottom. Okay, if you go through the bottom, there's not much we can do about that. We can make another like slab bottom later on, but there's nothing you can do to fix it on the wheel. So once I have that where there's a hole in it, I want to open up that hole a little bit. So I'm going to just kind of put my finger down and then pull it out a tiny bit towards myself. That opens that up. I think for this one I want it to be kind of tall. So whenever I want something to be taller, I have to constantly squeeze the clay back together because the centrifugal force of the wheel is pressing and making the clay want to go out. Okay, we're going to wait till the end. Okay, you'll see I keep dipping my hands in. My hands have to stay nice and damp. Now what I'm going to do is take this clay on the sides and I'm going to pull it up so that this gets taller and it thins out those sides, because remember, if clay is too thick, that's something that can explode in the kiln. So we want this to be kind of nice and thin, but if you go too thin, it can fall apart on you, which is what happened to me third period. So what you're doing is just squeezing your fingers together, one on the inside, one on the outside, with the clay in between. I'm resting my elbow on my leg so that I'm keeping my body nice and still, and then I'm squeezing and letting this clay come up. And as it gets thinner, I have to go slower and slower with the wheel, or again, it's going to pull it out, and that's not good. The clay can fall apart on you. Can we get the giggles under control, please? Can you stay in one spot, please? Yeah. So this was only about 1 pound of clay. It was really small, only about the size of my fist. That's the amount that I suggest you start with, because the more clay you use, the harder it is to center it. I've only been able to get up to about 15 pounds of clay, because it literally takes all the force in my body to get that much clay to center. Now, one thing you'll notice as I'm doing this is I never take my hands off quickly or touch something quickly. Everything I do is very slow, and you want to make sure that wherever you've touched has gone and made the same touch all the way around. So if I'm fixing something like this top edge, I don't want to just quickly touch it. I have to make sure my finger lets the clay go all the way around. If I do a quick movement, I'm going to end up with like a spot in it that's off-centered. Okay? I think that's pretty good. The only thing I might want to do now is like shape it. And again, I'm kind of going for that taller look. So I'm going to squeeze this together a little bit. So if I'm squeezing, I can bring the clay in, but I have to be careful because it's a little bit thin. One wrong move can collapse the whole thing.
Focus.
Yes, ma'am. Can I
Not
do
now.
that?
No. What do we want to make? A mug?
Go for it.
Make a bowl.
Coffee mug.
Why are you putting the sponge inside?
So when I drip the water in, it all puddles up at the bottom sometimes, and you don't want to leave that puddle in there. So you have to keep the sides wet, but when you do that, it puddles. And sometimes I like to use the sponge instead of my finger for shaping it, just because I know the sponge is wet, and I'm not going to ruin it by getting any friction with my finger. So if I press from the inside, you can see it getting a little bit fatter. And then again, when I work my hands on the outside, I can squeeze it to get a little bit thinner. And that's how you're controlling your shape a little bit.
It looks like a vase.
Are we making a mug, Miss Mac?
You can make whatever you want to make.
Are we have to do this?
We're going to each get a day.
I need one.
Each person gets their own day?
Yeah. Okay, so now I think I'm good. I'm going to leave this. I'm going to add a handle later on. So what I have to do is get rid of the extra clay, and I'll actually do this step for you because at this point it's really fragile, and if you mess it up, you'll collapse your whole thing. So I'll come back with this a little bit slower, I think, and take off some of this extra clay at the very bottom. What do you think?
That's